Hi there, Dave Levine here. Thanks ever so much for joining me for episode 48 of the Sports Stories podcast. This is the podcast where we delve and dive into the lives and the sports stories of people who have had successful careers in and through sport. Now, last week we had Brian Ashton, MBE. It was such an enlightening and an entertaining conversation I had with Brian, and he really made us think. Now, today we have another leader, somebody else at the top of their game in leading an organisation. I'm really pleased to say that today's guest is Dan Newton. Dan is the Chief Executive Officer of Parkour UK, and I'm delighted to have the leader of a lifestyle sport organisation. I'm really excited because I'm sure Dan will give us a real great insight into the world of leading a new governing body or a new organisation that's really developing, and tell us and show us how he's developing, bringing a lot of the work that he's done in sport development, and also how he's transitioned through his career and picked up loads of experiences along the way. Dan will also really make you think. He's open, he's honest, he's humble, and I'm sure will give us plenty of gems because I know one of his desires is to really make a difference. So as always, sit back or grab a pen, do what you need to do, grab a cup of tea, go out on your bike ride or go for a walk, but do what you need to do to ensure that you can maximise the opportunity of getting the most from Dan's story. As always, please feedback, let us know how you get on, let us know some of the success stories you have, because they really make a difference and really inform us in terms of what we bring to you. And those feedback and that really keeps us inspired and moving us forward. So all it leaves me to say is a really, really warm welcome to my special guest today, the Chief Executive Officer of Parkour UK, Mr. Dan Newton. Dan, it's really great to have you with me. Thanks for joining me on the Sports Stories podcast today. I'm feeling really excited about talking to my first chief executive of a life sport organisation. So welcome and thanks for giving up some time for joining me today. I guess just as an intro, do you want to just tell the guests that are listening in a little bit about yourself and also about the sport that you're the chief executive of?
I can do. So firstly, thank you. It's great to have the opportunity to chat with you, and it's good. So my name's Dan. I work with Parkour UK. We are the national governing body for parkour. Parkour hasn't particularly been in need of a governing body because it's, as a community, it's probably one that doesn't particularly want to be governed, but ultimately we're obviously trying to take responsibility for the work that kind of can take place to help them thrive, and obviously there's certainly an influencing job that they'll benefit from in terms of what we're trying to do. I've worked in sport pretty much all my career. My background is very much sport rather than parkour. My colleagues at Parkour UK are both from the community, so I suppose we cover a couple of different areas in our backgrounds, which is hopefully the reason why things are going okay at the moment. So.
Gosh, brilliant. Well, it's really exciting to hear a little bit more about, obviously, the sport of parkour, but also your journey. A bit about you, a quick snapshot of your career. You said you spent most of your time working in sport. What have you done? Where have you been? And how did you get into it at an early age?
Okay, so I'm from Sheffield. I suppose first interactions with sport were probably with my brother in the back garden, various different sports, and I suppose throughout my childhood I tried most things and kind of had a go. I think the sports that required hand-eye coordination were the ones that I probably didn't succeed in that well, but the ones that were probably more down to strength and power and perseverance and that type of stuff, I kind of came through on those okay. My career in sport, so I graduated from a sports development degree and got enrolled straight within it was a split role actually, partly with the City Council in Sheffield and the South Yorkshire County Sports Partnership. And then from there I went into a different county sports partnership in Derbyshire. Obviously county sports partnerships now are referred to as active partnerships, but I suppose back in the day that's the term that was used. And then from working in CSPs, I wanted to try and get a little bit of a different perspective on sport. So moved into working in governing bodies. First one that I worked for was Rounders, and I was there for about 9 years. And since then, obviously, I've got a role in working with Boccia England. I sit on their board, and obviously this role with Parkour UK since last year.
And Dan, before we sort of come to your career, I'm kind of curious about those early stages of, you know, your childhood and upbringing. You say you played some sports around, you know, the strength and power kind of areas, but, you know, what was it about sport that really hooked you and attracted you?
That's a good question. I wasn't particularly, I didn't particularly thrive in school. So if you think about the more academic subjects, I suppose my dad's always kidded me a little bit that I didn't try that hard when I was younger, which is probably the case. But certainly sport for me was somewhere that I felt at home, and yeah, there was that connection with other people, teammates, and obviously I got a lot from the camaraderie of team sports and being with other people, and I suppose I think that mentality of being in a team and having the people around you, they need you and you need them, and obviously there's kind of like a caring friendship, as it were. That's, I suppose, part of the central cog for me, and I think that's where I still love sport to this day, and I'm pretty sure I always will, to be honest. So.
Do you recall a time where you thought, right, I want a job in sport?
So I think when I was probably first thinking about what I wanted to do with my life, I think sport was the place where I probably wanted to end up. And at that point, so kind of the mid-1990s, there was a sense of you could be a PE teacher or you could be a professional sports person. Yeah. And for me, neither of those were particularly likely. One definitely because I wasn't good enough, and the other because it probably just it wasn't me. I didn't really fancy it. I think as I went through education more and more, so I did GCSE PE, A-level sports studies. I got onto a HND in sport, and then I went from a 2-year HND onto the second year of the degree in sport again. What happened through that time, which in essence was was 8 years, because obviously there was 2 years in each of them, more and more opportunities kind of came about in my mind around what I could do, and yeah, I think that to me was would be the point.
And I asked that question, I guess, because there's so many of the listeners will be thinking, you know, how do I get into sport? You know, what opportunities are available? You know, what avenues are there into this? And it's just hearing your story that, you know, not following a traditional sort of performance route in terms of an athlete or a player, but also a lot of people end up going down the as you say, the PE teacher kind of route. And hearing your story is just fabulous to hear. You know, there are other opportunities here, aren't there? Definitely.
100%, and now there are more and more. I mean, one of the pieces of work that we're doing at Parkour at the moment is a project which is trying to explore the varied different roles that are in place in lifestyle sports, and we're doing that with a couple of other sports. But ultimately, being a content creator, or being a park designer, or being an instructor, that they are the legitimate things that you could do. And I suppose when I was coming into the sector, there weren't as many as those kind of roles. Do you know what I mean? It's obviously expanded over the years, and that enables people to feel to come into the sector and be a part of it, which I think is a hugely important thing. There's I know since we've done a lot of great work on that, and Sports England have obviously been part of the driving force in England. And like I say, that gives many young people who are probably a little bit disillusioned by the traditional route and not necessarily motivated by the traditional route. It gives them something to aspire to, really.
Well, and hearing your story, I guess, through the ideas, through a degree in sport, through rounders, through different sports, being on a board, being a CEO of an organisation, do you have a mantra at all, Dan, or like a motto or anything which you kind of live by or drive yourself by through your career?
There's probably a few that over the years I've kind of, I suppose I've tried to live by. My mum and dad are a big driving force in the way that I try and perform and behave and all those things. And there's loads of different ones that kind of came from them. I suppose one of the ones that I found that was introduced to me by a business coach a few years ago was one which kind of, I can't remember the whole kind of piece, but it's this sense of concentrating on changing yourself. And as a younger version of yourself, you try and change the world, you try and change your country, you try and change, you have big grand views of how you can change others. And ultimately, as an older person, the person who kind of said the quote or put the thing together is this bit about reflect on changing yourself. And if you change you can begin to change, you can go in the other direction, you can change the things which may then one day mean that you eventually change the world. And I think that made a real impact on me at the time. And I remember having some really good, helpful conversations with that guy that made me think differently, really. So.
And how have you brought it to life, apart from just having those conversations with that individual person? How have you tried to change yourself? Because it really lands fantastically with me, the idea of actually starting with yourself, your own awareness and changing yourself. It's a real principle of what we're doing with Sports Stories and the podcast and the content around that. I'm just conscious about, how have you brought that to life for you?
Yeah, so I think the importance of education and learning for me has always been quite central. I mean, that's quite ironic in what I said earlier about the fact that I didn't really engage with school particularly strongly. Yeah. I think when I got interested in something, and always when I've got interested in something, I've followed it through, and it's almost taken something to trigger that, kind of capture my imagination or trigger something that's ultimately wanted to make me do it. So I think, I don't know, really, I'm always trying to learn, really, and I'm always trying to kind of immerse myself in other people's experiences and listen to their stories. So I suppose meeting people, like I say, just connecting. If somebody comes across my path, I'll try and meet up with them and just kind of get to know them a bit more. And I suppose that's where that's where kind of the network comes from, really. And most of the things that I've been able to do have ultimately been solved through networks, getting other people to solve your problems for you. And I think that's quite a big thing. I suppose experiences, for me, it's about trying to vary the content of what you're trying to put yourself in. So a number of the courses that I've tried to do over the years have been, quite, like I say, off the beaten path in terms of what you might put in place as somebody who's in a career that, or kind of doing what I'm trying to do. And like I say, I've taken something from pretty much all of the things I've done. So, like I say, it all kind of complements one another. I think there's a couple of roles that I've taken. So I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to join an advisory committee, which ultimately kind of recruits magistrates to work in the family courts and the crime courts in South Yorkshire and Humberside. And I've learned so much from that process. And it's like I say, I've worked with people that I genuinely would have never ever met in my life. And I've met people that have completely astounded me for very different reasons to what I would have, to what I've kind of enjoyed before. And again, that's, like I say, that role, if you look at my, I suppose, if you look at my CV and the things that I've kind of been lucky enough to do, that's a bit off the beaten path. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily put that alongside the other stuff, but it's a great thing. So it's, I think the other things are probably then just reading and listening. So, I mean, I read lots. I listen to kind of audiobooks, podcasts, whatever, just to try and, just fill my mind with different ideas, really, and ultimately start conversations with people. So.
I love the idea of off the beaten path. You really made me think and smile when you said that, in terms of, the transferability. For me, you're jumping around into so many different places because you recognize there's learning in them, or you've gathered or got something. If I put you on the spot, Dan, what have you got from that work in the advisory panel and the group? What did you get that's brought back into your role in sport, would you say? One or two things? Because I'm sure there's loads of great stuff you've picked up.
So we had the one experience that sticks with me, and obviously I can't talk, it's not naming names or anything, but sure. We had, within some of the interviews that we did, we had two candidates back to back, one of whom was a very successful kind of leader in the banking industry, and there was somebody who was then on the flip side a bit younger, a little bit less experienced, and had a different set of strengths. What happened in the interviews was that the one that you wouldn't expect was the one that flew and right. Was incredible, and they made the way through to the next stage of interview, and the one that you might have expected would have got through, because they'll have done lots of high-flying interviews before, and they'll have been able to convey what they're about in different ways before. They didn't, and it was, I suppose, that really made me sit back and think, and it was really satisfying to be able to help draw out of somebody the strength. So being a magistrate is about 6 key qualities, and what you have to be able to do is articulate your experiences against those 6 key qualities. And she did an incredible job that day, and I remember writing down or kind of making a personal note of the ways in which she framed things, because I thought it was amazing. And that was one of those where I don't know, you kind of reading the CVs and reading their applications before the interview, you might have thought candidate A goes through, candidate B doesn't, but in actually meeting them and going through the process, it was so that in some ways that's always about having your eyes open and just not necessarily not necessarily going with maybe the evidence that's on paper, or the I suppose there's a flip side to that, but I think in this instance, it definitely gave me that sense of thinking a bit broader about it.
Gosh. And I love the idea of bringing stuff from other areas and applying it. But there's also something I'm hearing in there about, the prejudgments that you bring to the work we do, and how we have to just watch those, you make a really great point there.
There's a question which relates to what are your prejudices? So, and ultimately it's what are your biases? And there's a long conversations that go on kind of in the deliberation around what you do with kind of candidates, which is about this sense of everybody has a prejudice or everybody has a bias. You can say that I don't have any prejudices or I don't have any biases, but that's probably not the right. You know what I mean? Everybody at some point has them. I mean, I'm against cruelty to children, and I'm against if somebody, like I say, if somebody comes across my path that has a background in doing something pretty horrible, it's hard to, it's kind of hard to get past that, really. Now, don't get me wrong, you should always give, you should always view the situation as it is, but you have to acknowledge and know those things in order to be able to do it, really. So.
Gosh, and you give a real strong message there, you know, the idea that we can learn and look so many places to learn, you know, whether we're working in sport or out, these things are just paralleled across, aren't they? They're common to the different environments. So Dan, you know, what's been some of your greatest achievements and successes in the world of sport? What have you been most proud of?
I think there's a lot that we're trying to do in the sports sector, which is about bringing, it's obvious, it's been curated over the years about trying to get more people playing, and there's lots of occasions where a basketball program or a rounders program or one of the governing bodies that I work with in Derbyshire have run something and delivered a program that's got more people playing that's been brilliant. And like I say, they're definitely, there's loads of those which I kind of think about, which are quite satisfying. I think as the sector's evolved a bit and certainly matured, the message is obviously more now about trying to think about the social outcomes that emerge from sport and the life skills that you generate from being involved in sport. A lot of the stuff that we've already talked about, life skills emerging from sport, that's, like I say, that changes people's lives, and that's ultimately the opportunity to try and get them to do the things that fulfill the dreams and do the things that they want to do. So I think like I say, there were loads of people who have found their way in a sporting activity which has given them the opportunity to do something else in their lives. And there was there's a few. I mean, like I say, I remember one student who did who did one of the programs, and he gave the impression at the beginning that when he came to university, he was a bit lonely, he was kind of on his own, and he didn't really enjoy his first year at university for a number of different reasons. And then in the second year, he kind of got involved in the sporting program and found a group of people that he quite liked, and obviously they were a bit different to him, but ultimately they gave him some sense of friendship, and ultimately that's taken him to that made him really thrive, he thinks, in years 2 and 3 at university, because obviously he had that friendship group that was brought about to him through sport. And for me, they're the big ones. And there's loads of parkour at the moment where parkour is a very personal endeavour, and what you effectively work through is in many ways work on yourself, and there is a bit about kind of overcoming the jump and overcoming the barrier that you don't think you can do something, but then you can. And obviously the steady progress, the incremental gains towards being able to do it. And to me, that's obviously some of the really elite parkour athletes do an incredible job at that, and the videos they produce are pretty sensational. But the little boy or the little girl or the, like I say, the teenager who is using it as a vehicle to kind of do something else, to me, that's where the magic is. So.
Gosh, you know, that whole thing about social skills, and you know, this is parkour. It seems like it's a real manifestation of life's challenges here, isn't it? You know, how do we overcome it both physically but also mentally? And you know, it really plays to the idea that sport plays a real vehicle for development, isn't it, of ourselves as individuals or communities or whatever, which is, you know, again, really plays to my principles as well.
100%. It's amazing, honestly. I have loved the last. I mean, obviously, I've been in this role since July last year, so it's coming up to a year. I did some work as on an interim basis on a kind of a pro bono piece before, and over that period of time, I've really come to enjoy the experience and like I say, the people that are involved. Like, lifestyle sport's different. It's not. It's, I suppose, the analogy that we've been using as a team is there's a sense that when I play football between 7 and 9 on a Monday, or 8 and 9 on a Monday, and at that time I'm a footballer, and like I say, I could call myself a footballer, only very questionably, because clearly
I know what you mean.
If you've ever seen, well, anybody who's ever seen me play football probably might have a different.
You're on a football pitch running around.
There we go, and I've got a kit on. So yeah. But the sense with lifestyle sport is that it's part of you. So if you are into skateboarding, that's you. If you are a parkour practitioner, that's you. Yeah, it's the way you move. It's the way you kind of think about the world, and that's. Yeah, like I say, that's it's a real different way, and it's forced me to think very differently. And the partners that we're bringing on board, the feedback they give us is that obviously it's a different model to perhaps some of the more traditional sports, which is breath of fresh air. Really, it's great.
And I guess it also challenges your thought process, doesn't it, and who you are, and it's challenging your identity in the way you turn up in the world. You know, which is again, I guess what I really like about this is just not run of the mill, is it? It's getting people to have a view and challenge themselves and get them to think, you know, again, which is a real manifestation of the world we live in, isn't it?
Yeah, completely agree. Agree. Yeah.
Dan, you know, we talked about the positives of your world, and you know the parts that you've played in taking parkour and what it brings to people's lives. You know, I know you've worked really hard and your life has not been all sort of smooth. You know, what have been some of the challenges that you've faced on your journey? Because look, individuals facing into the world of their career will recognize that things are not always on the up. They're not always on a high. There are some real downs as well. And I'm just wondering what you've encountered and how you've managed yourself through some of those harder times.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I suppose I don't view myself as different particularly, and I don't think my path's harder than other people's. It's the route I've been, and it's the only one I can comment on. But yeah, there's certainly been times. I mean, I suppose on a personal basis, there's been 2 significant losses. So I lost a child in 2009. My wife and I, it was our first little boy, and he died after 20 days, which was utterly heartbreaking, and obviously took me, kind of knocked me for 6. I lost my mum and my mother-in-law in the space of 4 weeks, 3 years ago now, and obviously that kind of the repercussions of that for my family. My kids were obviously quite little at the time, and obviously those types of experiences have a real seismic knock-on effect to everything that you do. And I think for me, this whole sense of trying to understand the whole person and trying to understand what's going on in somebody's world that makes them feel the way that they do is huge. And I think you have to, you have to try and ultimately look at things in as positive way as you possibly can, and try and ultimately, get back on the horse and just try and go again, really. And fortunately, I've got some incredible friends and family, and they've always been around me to go to the pub, or to go for a run, or to go to the park and kick a ball about, or throw a ball about, whatever. It's like I say, the friendship networks ultimately the things that get you through, and for me that's something that I'm, like I say, really grateful for.
Those are really big, as you say, seismic events. And then, you know, when you say we have to try and get back up on the horse, how do you do that? it can't be, there's, everybody has their own big challenges, don't they? But it's how do we turn that around? And I'm just thinking, experiences like you faced there, they're massive. And I'm just wondering, you've given a slight insight, but are there any other thoughts or tips or guidance, or, how do you turn positive?
We saw, my wife and I saw a therapist, bereavement counsellor from the Children's Hospital in Sheffield for a couple of years after Ben died. And some of the things and some of the techniques that she went through with us are kind of the things that I'd still use to this day and kind of recognise in myself. So this sense of trying to smile about what's happened and what's gone on in the past, and that things always weren't as bad as they currently are, is huge. And trying to have that frame of reference about the past. Equally, looking forward to things as well, and having things on the horizon about what's good and what's going to be good and what's the next thing that's going to make you smile. And in some ways it's interesting, because obviously living in the moment is the recommended term, isn't it? People, you hear that a lot about trying to think about this live the moment you're in now.
Be present.
Exactly. And not follow any of those. But I remember a lot of the things that we went through at that time was about obviously acknowledging that we were going through grief. It wasn't, we were quite clear, I think, to define that we weren't depressed, we were going through grief, and the two separate things. And obviously for us, having another child helped. I mean, that's been the experience of being parents again, and like I say, being able to, my kids are now 10 and 8, so obviously there's been huge loads of fun in there, but it goes, I think from the mum one, I mean, you've only got one mum, and I mean, for me, she was a huge role model for me, and a huge, I looked, like I say, she was in many ways, her and my dad, but in many ways, mum was a real constant around, if something wasn't going right, she was always kind of there, and
the rock or the inspiration kind of stuff.
And look, I'm very happily married. I've been together with my girlfriend, now wife, since kind of 1998. So it's a long time that we've been together. But and like I say, but obviously it's different. It's a different relationship to kind of the relationship I had with my mum, and I miss her every day. I miss both of them every day. So it's the way that it is, but I don't know, you have to get on with it, and unfortunately stuff like that happens in life, and you like I say, you need to get on. So.
Well, it does happen like that, but I just love the way you talk it out there, Dan, because it's something about how you use the experience, don't you? And again, you're learning from it or taking stuff from it to propel you forward, and I just think it's a dreadfully upsetting and difficult times, and like you say, many of us have these in different ways or shapes or forms, but how you're recalling it even and connecting it to what's going on now, and how it's used as a positive, not in, you're using the story and the experience to help drive you forward, and I just think it's a lovely positive message, which I applaud you for. And I want to say that because I think, so many of us are having a hard time in different ways, and it's about how do we find ways through these things, by talking to people and so on.
Oh, 100%. Thank you for saying that. That means a lot. I mean, I think it's always, there were loads of things that during the year after Ben and the year after Mum that were day-to-day tasks that I couldn't do, that I just needed to lean on a friend, and I needed to get somebody else to do them. But like I say, fortunately, the friends and family around me all, like, on occasion stepped up and did things that they wouldn't normally do for me, but ultimately in that circumstance they did, and like I say, it's that's something I'm hugely grateful for.
And just before we move on, you know, the last thing that really comes to me here, Dan, is also that idea of you showing your vulnerability in terms of, you know, there were times where I couldn't do things and people stepped up for me. And I just think as a leader, that's such a powerful strength, you know, whereas many people still see as a, you know, they put the brave face on it and shut it all down. And I think whether in sport, leadership, business, you know, we have some tough times and we need to kind of nearly embrace them to help us move on through them. And I just think you really epitomize that as well.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. There's a huge element of all of this that we're making up as we go along, and there's no getting away from that. I mean,
there's no book, is there? You know, tell us what to do.
Well, there's no parenting book, or I haven't found it yet, and there's no obviously there's no. There's plenty of books that kind of give you advice, but in terms of telling you what you need to do at any one given time, that doesn't exist. So. Yeah, like I say, I mean, for me, it's you've got to try and be honest every day and get up and do your best, and like I say, it's as simple as that, really. So.
Yeah. Well, and moving, you know, leading the parkour governing body, as it were, a kind of a community which you said didn't really need or want to be governed, but you're really trying to help it move forward. You know, where's all that going then? What's your hope and desire, and what's the, you know, again, picking up on the positives, where do you positively hope this all moves forward over the next short while, and what are the challenges you see ahead of you to overcome?
So parkour is, we've tried to categorize the community into the unstructured part and the structured part.
Right.
The structured part is practitioners running classes in parks or in gyms, owning gyms and having open sessions. And for that type of stuff, there's a more or less a sports development model. So there's a qualification, there's an insurance, there's a system that you need to be able to wrap around that in order to make those people, help those people thrive and kind of keep them on the way. That part of it looks like a governing body and looks like many of the other sports that I've had the pleasure of working in. But there is a different side in the unstructured bit. So we're doing a piece of insight at the moment, which is trying to explore the brands, the stars of this world, Jimmy the Giant, Ampy Sound. There's a number of different people that create content that effectively commentate on parkour culture. I think there's 15 parkour podcasts at the moment, which is pretty more than I thought there was when I kind of came about. But there's this sense of understanding the culture and being able to influence and stand up for those people. So it's very easy to understand that if somebody wants to run a coaching company, you can put on a qualification for them, you can work with them to get some the system around them that need to be able to thrive. But what is it that you want to do for someone who creates content, puts it on YouTube and does that type of work? Or what is it that you want to do for someone who is a performer and they want to get work in either from the stunt register or from TV or kind of whatever, really. That's a bit of a different relationship, and what we're doing at the moment is very much exploring that. So we're trying to keep our heads up and listen as much as we can. And Chris and Omar, who are my colleagues at Parkour, are both utterly brilliant. They're from the community, and where I'm bringing insights from outside of parkour and
the
from
sports
the sports
community.
and exactly from a number of years of working with Sports England and Youth Sport Trust and Sport Rec Alliance and all of the partners. What they're managing to do is enable us to try and connect that to the community and speak to real people. So I mean, Omar goes out and trains with all the cool guys, and he's got a great job. So
well, we'll be dragging you along soon.
He has dragged me along, and I'm definitely not as fluent as he is. But there you go. So.
And Dan, as you as a senior leader, you know, in the times that we're kind of living in, what do you see as kind of the challenges and opportunities for you in the role that you play?
That's a good question. I think the biggest thing is this sense of collaboration and this sense of, I suppose the shared services term is one that's been muted a lot in sport for a while, and it's probably been defined as something that's not quite what it is. Where I think it can work is this notion that if you design the sports system now, knowing everything that you know, I'm pretty sure you won't put it together in the way that it's put together. I think what you would do is try and make sure that the areas in which organisations can share something, you encourage them to do, and you make it practically possible for them to do that, and you incentivise them to do it. And I think that one of the things that we're trying to do with other lifestyle sport governing bodies, the inclusion national bodies in the country, and a number of others, is just to try and say, well, you do something really well, and we'd rather work with you to help us do that well, rather than employ somebody different to try and then come and do that well for us. And I think that's this sense of everybody standing shoulder to shoulder in the sports sector being not one organisation, because that it never will be, and that's, it needs some competition and it needs some difference. But for me, if somebody's best placed to do something in coaching in London, that's the person you should go to, rather than trying to find someone else. It's how can you? That's probably not the best example, but it's how. How can we make that work with each other rather than in silos and in isolation?
And I hear something about really playing to people's or organisational strengths.
Definitely.
And there's a principle that drops down to us as individuals. Why don't we play to our strengths or our interests and what we're good at?
Absolutely. I mean, we've the work that we're doing at the moment through our workforce subcommittee. We have. We've got a group of parkour practitioners who are interested in the topic. We've got 3 practitioners from the sports sector. So Sean Kitson, who worked for Sports England, Vinnie Webb, who's working with them through Simspur, and Claire Freer, who's working for UK Coaching. What they're ultimately doing is bringing their insights to us in order to be able to make the work that we do better. And for me, that's the only way. Do you know what I mean? That it's about making sure we try and bring as many other people into what we're doing as we can, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. And I mean, there's loads of times where I've been involved in things that have tried to reinvent the wheel. So I'm absolutely
trying not to do that.
Yeah, look, you've got to be, like I say, you've got to be honest about that, haven't you? Really. So it's fun. Man.
Well. It sounds like an amazing journey and a really sort of exciting time ahead, because I guess we're going into a bit of an unknown. And I was talking to one of my previous podcast guests about the notion of impossibility, and actually how we can really push the boundaries and do things differently. And I just love the idea that, we've got a lifestyle sport here, which has got a relatively blank sheet of paper in some areas, and where we could go.
That's the huge opportunity, Dave. I mean, it's like So James Hope Gill, who does the job that I do in skateboarding, we're, I suppose, in a really advantageous position in the sense that the modernising of our governing bodies isn't letting go of baggage and trying to change things that have got 10, 20 years of history. What we're trying to do is set something up, and that's... I love that. I think that's a huge opportunity, and hopefully one that we can make the most of, really. So,
well, I guess many organisations that are looking to modernise, whether in sport or out, might need to come and knock on your door as such and say, come on, help us think about this differently, because I think we look through a different lens here, I guess, rather than changing what's gone, but actually reinventing, and we have a great, as you say, opportunity. It's freer somehow.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but yeah, I think we're always happy to try and help others, and for me, it's that's an obligation more than anything else to try and make sure that you try and make sure that that those insights are shared, really. But we'll see.
Well, coming back to you, in terms of your journey and your story, you've mentioned that you're a learner. You've recognised the value of learning from so many different places, and I'm just going to focus in here with a couple of sort of quick fire questions, because you've given lots away. You've shown your real openness and vulnerability to your story and your journey and what's happened, and I'm just wondering how we can add a few little gems to some of the listeners. And in terms of what's really been an inspiration to you, or an insight to you in terms of resources and books, can you recommend anything as such?
Yeah, there's loads of books, really. I mean, I read, certainly in the last few years, I've read more and more. I kind of listen to audiobooks, so that means that I can kind of get through more as well, because obviously I can walk around the block a little bit and keep going. So I think from a kind of non-fiction point of view, I think probably the books of Malcolm Gladwell, Matthew Said, and Michael Lewis are the ones that they consistently be the ones that I've enjoyed the most. And like I say, anytime there's another book from one of those people, I'll try and get to a point where I'll buy it and I'll read it, because, like I say, I love the way that they tell stories. Yeah. They invariably, the three of them, they tell stories. They don't teach lessons. They tell you a story about this, or like I say, the Black Box Thinking book from Matthew Said is a story about healthcare and a story about aviation, and wraps up within it lots of other different things, and that's I quite enjoy that. So yeah, but there's, like I say, there's loads of brilliant books that I've not read yet, which is quite exciting. So.
Well, and I ask all my podcast guests, what books have inspired them, because we've got a real sort of library of them now. But I just love the idea there that you've said it tells a story, and how you can take the content and the gems within it and apply it to your world, and I think, again, that's just fantastic.
That's the storytelling thing, though, isn't it, Dave? It's like, it's you remember stories. You don't, like I say, I suppose me thinking back to school, I didn't interpret many of the lessons at school as stories. I interpreted them as a set of facts that I needed to remember, and I didn't really get that. So, so I think that's huge, and I enjoy that.
Dan, what advice would you give to a teenage version of yourself now that you've been on the journey you've been? Again, just thinking to those guys starting off in their career, coming up, being interested in getting a role in sport, what advice might you give them, or to help them on their way?
I think probably building networks. I think everything, like I say, I genuinely solve the things that I'm trying to encounter, or that I'm encountering, through relationships with other people. I mean, I was fortunate enough to do a course at Cranfield a few years ago, and what that did was that put 16 development directors, which is the role that I was in at the time, in the same room at the same time for kind of 3 lots of 3 days. And obviously the time that I was able to kind of spend with those people and others just keeps you, like I say, if you listen to 2 or 3 other people's problems, you either listen to how they've solved the problem that you're solving, or that you haven't yet solved, and it's kind of ammunition is probably not the right word, but it's kind of insights that you can ultimately pull back on in the future. And it's like I say, it's that to me is the biggest thing. And I've got, like I say, there's a number of different people who I would call friends now. Do you know what I mean? Like I say, I know about the kids, I know about the football teams, I know about everything that's
people.
Definitely, that kind of matters to them, really. And I think that's I definitely try to take that into to those relationships, really, and hopefully it comes back, really. So.
Yeah, well, and a great advice, I think. It's something that through my career I've recognised through times when it's been really great. That networks have really mattered, but when they've dropped off, you notice that as well. So I think it's a lovely point to say, they need nurturing, and they need watering, as it were, just keeping going and working at, because it's really important.
Yeah, I mean, COVID's been a real opportunity for that, I think, though, because you invariably, like I say, before the pandemic started last year, you would generally, with some people, you would see them at a certain meeting, or you'd see them at a certain venue in a certain place. And I suppose what it's forced people to do, and I've been a part of this, is, like I say, just have a cup of tea with someone on a call that just enables you to kind of catch up with them. And then they're in a different part of the country and you're in a different part of the country. It's kind of
doable, isn't it?
Really, yeah, definitely. But Zoom and Teams have opened up a huge new world for that, because you no longer have to find half an hour in a certain space at a certain time to meet somebody. You can do that at any time. Do you know what I mean? It's easier. Arguably, you can do it just after you've you've finished your day, or you're having your lunch, or kind of whatever, really. And that's I think that's definitely been a good thing. So.
Great. And Dan, I've got two last questions for you, and they're related to stories and to you, actually. And the first one is, you mentioned about your parents being a real influence. Are there any other people that have been really pivotal? And I appreciate in a story like yours, there'll have been many at different stages and times, but are there any standout sort of moments or people that you think, wow, they were really influential to me and they helped me change direction or go in a certain direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of the people that have offered me a job and that I've reported to, I've learned something from. So Tim Lum, David Joy, Alison Howard and Steve Mitch are, like I say, all of those have, in many cases, shaped and influenced lots of the things that I do, and I owe a huge debt of gratitude to all of those people. I think the network of development directors, heads of, CEOs now, who are doing the same types of things that I'm trying to do, they've done all the things I've got to do before me. So it's like I say, if you hopefully we can try and I can try and listen to them and find out how to do things, really. So
share alike again, or learn from.
Yeah, I think in terms of individuals, there's a guy called Chris Brinley who's been incredibly generous with his time over the years. I first met him I heard him talk at a conference probably 2007, 2008, something like that, and I've kind of tried to spend more and more time with him, and I'm fortunate enough now that I'm kind of working with him a little bit closer in the role that I'm doing, and he's helping shape a lot of the stuff that we're doing at Parkour. He's a brilliant human being, and I have learned absolute buckets from him, and like I say, I'm sure that's a relationship that I'll look to prioritise in the years to come. There's a guy called Simon Ridd who used to work for Sport England. He had he worked for Sport England for a long time, probably 20 plus years, I think. And I worked with him from kind of a sports participation point of view. And he, like I say, he kind of helped me do kind of grow a program on a national scale, and be able to work with networks and try and make different parts of the system thrive. And I learned a lot from him, and it was good. But there's two, like I said,
so many.
There's loads. There is genuinely, and I feel very fortunate that I've managed to kind of be able to spend time with so many great people, because ultimately they, if you, like I say, listening to them for half an hour is liquid gold in terms of one day being able to succeed, really. So.
You beautifully lead me on to my last question, which would be, who would you like to spend an extra half an hour in terms of their sports story? Who would really offer additional or great value, or somebody that you're really quite curious about? Because you've given your story, now it's time to sort of say, I wonder what somebody else's could offer you.
I don't know. Genuinely, Dave, for me, it would be anyone. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
I think there are so many. Like I say, on the in the chief exec forum, there's probably 30% of the people I know pretty well. 30% of the people I've had the odd interaction with, and like I say, the rest I'm kind of not yet in a friendship or a relationship with. So I think that's a group that obviously I'm really keen to understand a little bit more. I think where you generally find brilliant stories are people who have been involved in sports clubs for a long time and have been. There's a guy who runs, who's heavily involved in one of the cricket clubs in Sheffield that my boys did the All Stars programme a couple of years with. Yeah. And he used to be head teacher of secondary school. He's been involved in other sports, and obviously now he's doing cricket. For me, there's a lot of it's like transferable stuff that you can kind of bring from different things. So genuinely, and that's not to pass the question on, but I think it's trying to make sure that, like I say, I always try and challenge myself to certainly every month try and meet someone else, and well, like I say, even more frequent than that, really. So.
But I think, Dan, you know, and I really appreciate your response, because it plays to me again a little bit about the principles that underpin the Sports Stories podcast, because, you know, we very strongly believe here that everybody's got a story to tell, you know, and there's something in everybody's story, whether you're a high profile athlete, CEO, whatever, or actually a young person coming through and telling their story. There's nuggets and gems in them. So, you know, I really understand where you're coming from, but I think you give me the sense, though, that you're happy to look for the gems in anybody's story. So
yeah, definitely. And like, I mean, there's some really, really inspirational stories. I mean, like Yvonne Harrison from kind of the journey that she's had is brilliant. And like I say, I've listened to her talk a few times, and I think that demonstrates lots and lots of different inputs that ultimately enable somebody to move through from success to one success to another success, really, and challenges on top. I mean, there's a guy called Bourne Barricker who runs our parks, and I enjoy like I say, every time I get to spend time with Bourne, it's brilliant, because he brings so much energy, and obviously wants to do it good. But yeah, I could keep just, like I said, there's a load of people that have got really interesting stories to tell, and very happy to kind of go a bit further. But yeah.
Well, Dan, look, thanks ever so much for sharing your story and your journey. You know, there's loads of bits in there in terms of principles for leaders, CEOs, managers, but also people aspiring to have journeys through sport, you know, starting off their career. And I love the idea around parkour being a lifestyle sport, and actually there's so much for it yet to come in many ways. And you know, on that note, you know, should people be interested to find out a bit more about you or what you're doing within parkour, and the wider work you're doing, how might they be able to contact you? Or, you know, should they contact me and I'll pass on the details? What would suit best?
Well, you can certainly look up the Parkour UK Instagram or website, and obviously we're trying to tell a story there around what we're doing, and we'd be very, like I say, really interested in further conversations with folks who think they can try and help. I mean, I'm on, like I say, there's other channels that you can kind of get, but that would probably be the main one. So
yeah. Well, Dan, on that note, thanks so much again. You know, I can't say this enough about you just opening up and being vulnerable, sharing some of the highs, but also some of the lows. But I think, you know, both the highs and the lows of your career and the inspiration that you've picked up along the way gives a real insight. And for me, gives real hope to many people wanting to make a career, whether it be in a paid role or a voluntary role or just a participatory role within sport. So, you know, you paint such a broad brush picture, which is fabulous. So thank you ever so much.
I suppose there is a lot in there's a lot in life where you get told no, and you get told no again, you get told no again, you get told no again, and you have to be quite resilient, I think. And I went through many rejections to get to, like I say, the role that I'm lucky enough to do at the moment. And I suppose there's a little bit about trying to take something from each one of them and wow. using anything that comes back as feedback. And sometimes, a lot of the time, you won't like it, and obviously it'll hit a nerve or kind of maybe touch something that you didn't really want to think about, or it kind of challenges you. And it's like I say, I feel very lucky that I've had the opportunities that I have, and I'm hopeful that there's more to come, really. So it's all good.
Well, you remind me of that lovely picture where it suggests that careers and life is one very nice straight line, and it's actually absolutely not, is it? It's all over, but I think you're testament to the resilience and the perseverance and the hard knocks that actually make us who we are, and you've painted that picture brilliantly, and I think it gives me and others, I hope, much inspiration to, if we keep going at it and working hard and doing what we believe in, and coming back to your point about really understanding the whole person and understanding yourself, then you've not got a bad chance of doing all right, have you? So
no, thank you for that, and well done for what you're doing, because I think, like I say, this I haven't listened to all of your sports stories, but I've listened to a good number, and there's quite a variety and an eclectic mix of different people, which is should definitely be celebrated. And like I say, I wish you all the best with the future, really. So
brilliant. Well, keep in touch, Dan. Thanks ever so much. And let's come back for part 2 in a year or so, or something like that. Hey, and see where Parkour's got to in this period of time. But once again, thanks ever so much. I really appreciate it. Take care.
No problem.
So there we have it. Another great conversation with another special guest on the Sports Stories podcast. Dan was really humble, he was really authentic, he was really genuine, and it's a quiet sort of steeliness as a leader. He really brought many of his challenges to life. He was really open and honest, and I was really felt quite privileged to hear his story and his experiences, and I think his desire just to subtly and quietly keep moving things on and making a difference through the work that he's done. And he was really there to make a difference, and I think it's a real testament to his work as a developer in sport, or a sports development professional. A couple of things that really stood out for me were his challenges and the adversity that he's faced throughout his career, and how he's really spun that round to being a force for positivity and to drive him forward. He's really had some real big influential sort of losses, and he's suffered some big areas of grief, and how he's really embraced that actually and seen that as a positive, I think is a great testament to his perseverance and his desire to really make a difference through what he does. I really like the idea he learns from every environment that he embraces, speaking to people, exposing himself to different contexts. The work he did in the justice system and how he could bring that into his world of work in sport was just fantastic, and plays to that real principle that there's learning in everything we do, but there is a real skill in bringing the transferability from different environments into the one he currently works in. And I thought he brought that to life really, really powerfully. And lastly, the idea of networking, and how he really talked about so many people, and that he embraced what other people brought to him. He engaged with them, he made them come towards him and bring their strengths. And I think that shows a real power in his leadership approach and style, and being vulnerable to the fact he doesn't need to know everything, and actually he can learn from other people, and therefore bringing expertise from around him can make him a better leader, a better CEO. And I really like the idea of his sort of black book, and how he brought that together to really help him and grow that and recognize the power of his network. So there were 3 kind of big areas which really resonated from his kind of really honest, insightful and vulnerable story. Now again, what I would like to do is pose to you 2 or 3 questions, which I always do, to just get you thinking as well, and help you on your learning journey. Now, the questions I'd like to pose to you today are, Dan talked about his network, as I've just mentioned. Who's in your network? How well do you know them? and who and what is missing from your network. What do you need to do to really build? We often talk about that kind of your personal boardroom, and Dan didn't call it that, but he alluded to the idea of really making sure he got the right people around him, calling on them and using their powers and their strengths for both support and insight. The second question I'd like to pose is, what has been one of the greatest losses or rejections you have experienced? How has it affected you? And how could you use this experience to help you positively move on? It takes a real insight and again, a real power and determination to see that in a positive light. It probably really hurts at the time. But again, Dan gave a lovely story about how he's turned that and really embraced that, those losses and rejections, and seen that as a force for good, really, which is admirable, really. So I just want to pose that question to you. Now, as always, big questions, and I appreciate that, they're not easy to just roll off the tongue and come up with answers, but I want you to consider them. This is not just about entertaining. This is about really helping you delve into your life, into your story, and move things forward. So as always, if you've got some success stories or any greater challenges, please be in contact with me. Let me know how you're getting on. That the things that are really tough for you are good to hear, but equally so, the things that are really powerful and your success stories are great to hear and inspire other listeners on their journey, but also inspire me in terms of continuing to bring the great content and the stories to you. So as always, the place to make contact is through the website, which is www.sportstories247.com. Also, please link in with me on the different social channels of LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We have a presence on all those sites, and again, it's lovely to share stories, which is what we're trying to do, is just share stories. So please provide your success stories, and your motivations and inspirations will be great to hear. As always, I just want to bring to your attention some of the other work that's going on throughout the sports stories world. We've developed the online program now, which is going live. Many of the guests, including Dan today, have talked about how they've continually learned, really embracing different environments. And the Maximising Your Coaching and Leadership Impact program does just that. It provides tools, techniques, tips, loads more different stories as well, and things to really inspire you, to help you on your journey and really add great value to you. So again, have a look on the website for the Maximising Your Coaching and Leadership Impact program. It's there to really make a difference, and we're really, really proud of what we've pulled together with the help of many guests and great experience over the last 25 or so years of working in sport and business and people development. There's also, again, coaching support. Dan and previous guests have mentioned about the coaching support, how it's really made a difference to them, to really see a different perspective. Somebody's got the agenda and the backing of you. So again, have a look on the website. There's some great coaching services and offers there, and we have a pool of fantastic, credible, experienced and insightful individual coaches to support you on your personal and professional development. And all it again leaves me to say is thanks again for you listening, joining in, being part of the Sports Stories journey. It's brilliant to have you along on the journey. It really makes all the work that we do really worthwhile. We really want to make a massive difference to you and to the community through the power of and the vehicle of sport, which again, Dan really alluded to today, about sport being such a powerful vehicle for change, both for him and through the work that he does in parkour. And again, thanks, Dan. Without the guests that we have on and the great stories that they share, it wouldn't be the podcast that it is. So thank you for sharing, Dan. I really appreciate your insights. And again, we have great guests lined up for next week and further throughout the rest of the series. Next week, we have a fabulous guest on, again, working at the top of their field, has lived some real highs and lows, but is really interested in people and talent development, and has also worked in a number of different sporting context environments. So please join me again next week for another great Sports Stories guest. And until then, I just wish you a really great week. Join me again, Dave Levine. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.